Hi everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Brent O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Today we reflect the remarkable legacy of Snitzel, who died this week, including an interview with Arrowfield's John Messara. We look at how pinhooking works as a business model. We also have a special guest. We speak to Robert Heathcote about his breeding and training philosophies and his champ, Rothfire. Also in racing, we speak about James Cummings' move to Hong Kong, as well as the turmoil at the Melbourne Racing Club. And in wagering, Australia's biggest fixed odds punter is eyeing other shores, while the shake-up at Entain continues, and some other acquisition news. Tim, the big news of the week broke yesterday. Sadly, we've lost Snitzel, an absolute icon of breeding over the past 15, 20 years. He's done a remarkable job at Arrowfield, champion sire on 4 occasions. I'll read out his stats in a minute, but there's a few bigger names in Australian breeding in the 21st century than Snitzel. And it was a sad end for him at 22 years of age, but he's just touched on a remarkable legacy, carrying on that incredible influence of his grandsire Danehill and his sire Redute's Choice.
Absolutely, Brent. What he's achieved is quite phenomenal, and at stud, probably the best. Hopefully, perhaps the best to come, with the likes of Shinzo and Switzerland and in the Congo and different stallions are yet to progeny to hit the track. So, maybe they'll leave a legacy that way. But what's interesting for me is that I wouldn't say he did it the hard way, but he didn't come bursting out of the blocks with his first crop. I think he had 3 stakes winners with his first crop, not only second, and even his 4th season, Arrowfield brought his fee down. The market sort of wasn't quite accepting of them, and before they proved themselves on the track. And I think that's because commercial breeders love stallions that throw a type. They can send a mare, they more often than not going to get a good type, take it to the sales, get well paid for them. Well, he could throw horses that were a bit all over the shop, but now the market's accepted them. That most importantly, they can gallop. Most of them are very good and above average racehorses, and that's why this year he had his most successful crop of yearlings with the sales, certainly the highest average. So the market's continued to gravitate towards him over the last 10 years, and justifiably so.
Yeah, you look back through his record, he's had, from 1,631 runners, he's had 1,281 winners, 160 stakes winners, 103 group winners, I believe, and 23 Group 1 winners. His progeny have earned over $273 million. He stood for 2 seasons in Japan as well, probably a little known about that. Very few Australian sires have gone to Japan. Obviously, it didn't quite work out for him, but his value back at home was enormous. And what he was able to build was quite remarkable. And I think for Arrowfield, after obviously, in the sort of after Redute's Choice making such a big influence, and what was going on, there was naturally an opportunity in the market. And his 2-year-old record's extraordinary. We saw that this year with the Slipper winner Mahuna, but his 3-year-old record is extraordinary as well. He's equal with Danehill and Redute's Choice for Australian 3-year-old stakes winners. Now, if you consider the fact he's still got 4 crops of 3-year-olds still to come, Tim, coming through. So he's going to break that record quite easily. It's hard to overstate just how important he was.
The best son, I suppose, and it's a question of backing what you believe in, and he certainly came good. He started off reasonably slowly, but really picked up steam, and in the last decade he's been amazing. Multiple Australian championships and 2-year-old championships, all sorts of things. So wonderful.
What did you put that slow start down to? I know you even reduced his fee, I think, 4th season, and then he really kicked after that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to tell, but I guess with time you understand how to make them better. And so you can sort of help them along a little bit. But nature takes its course, and the way he went, because he seems to work with a variety of bloodlines, and he gets sprinters, milers, he gives you the odd stayer. So he's an enormously versatile horse, but it's been a great line, the Danehill line in this country. So it's not really a surprise that he's got one like that. It's a champion.
And you mentioned this Fred Ray's Thomas story as well, but it's well documented. He hasn't been 100%, in good health the last 12 months.
Well, the last 6 or 12 months, his health's been declining. But in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's got to a point where it got very serious, and we didn't want him to suffer. He's been such a great servant of the farm, and so we, with the assistance of the vets this morning, they took the view there was no coming back with him now. His liver was in poor order, and he was beginning to get some neurological signs. So we decided to euthanize him before things got overly bad. They were bad, or it was going to get even worse. So he went calmly, and sad scene.
And the Arrowfield as a team have managed him incredibly well. Just looking at his fertility right from well above average, and 114 mares that he covered last year as well.
Yeah, he's been well managed by the team and our vets all the way through, and he's been an easy horse to work with. Very compliant horse, great character, a bit like the reduced life, they're laid back and easygoing horses, and so they're easy to look after. You know what I mean? And they're loved by their attendants, and that was the case here.
And his current, rising 2-year-old, so sold extremely well, particularly at Easter. It just continues as everyone's looking for the new stallion to come through. It's Snitzel and I'm Invincible for that matter that just keep producing.
Yep. We'll see what comes through the ranks, particularly from that line, from that line. I've got a personal favourite, but we'll see what happens over time. And I don't think it's just going to die away with Snitzel. I think it'll continue. It's a very strong one.
Yeah. How did you pick him up for stud duties? Obviously, Gerald Ryan trained him, and
Gerald Ryan trained him, and he appeared unlucky in quite a few of his starts, and we had an eye out for a horse like that, and a horse with a lot of speed as well, and so we bought a minority interest, and the major owner kept elected to sell more equity as time went on, and we brought in partners. We syndicated him out. Our holding went up to about 40%, and the rest of it was in the hands of friends and partners.
Tim, onto a story now you covered earlier in the week. The fine margins operating of Australia's pinhookers. Now, the pinhook market's a key part of the market. We're sort of at the back end of the weanling sale at the moment, where people are investing in horses that they're probably looking to take back to the yearling market next year. It was a really interesting exercise, Tim, because we often see about the big pinhook results, and we often see the overall, this how much they paid for it, this how much they sold for it. But the commercial nature of pinhook is about much more than just that. The costs of the costs of bringing a horse from a weanling to a yearling are quite significant, aren't they?
Absolutely. And, the cost base we use for this analysis, some farms will be able to do it differently, but, you and I, Brent, don't have a farm, and I certainly don't have the horse husbandry skills either to be able to do that. So some farms will be able to do it cheaper, but if you and I were to pinhook a weanling and send it through to the sales next year, it's roughly what it would cost. It's about 40,000 from May to February. So if let's say we're pinhooking one into English Classic next year, it would cost us around 40,000, and then if we sold it for 100,000, that would lose another sort of 10 to 12,000 with commissions and vendor commissions and things like that. So it can cost you sort of $50,000+, a lot of money to get back. And if you believe in wisdom of the crowd and things like that, the overall pinhook market of those foals to resell as yearlings, overall they did show a profit, but of sort of a bit over $2,000. So lot of risk there involved, and there's a couple of outliers. 1,500 into 525 and 120 into 650 that sort of covered a lot of the losses, I guess, and that's the nature of the business. You've got to think long term. I've spoken to pinhookers before. Those that think they're going to just knock it out of the park in 1 year, you might get lucky, but you've got to take a long term approach over 5 years. It's same with the Colt syndicates and all those, taking a long term approach and to hit that jackpot.
Yeah, exactly right. And those key results, so it's about 329 horses we found that were pinhooked through Australasian Weevilling sales this year. And as you mentioned, the margin overall, I think it was 700, and trying to read my own handwriting now, $740,000 roundabout for the numbers overall profitability. But if you divide that between those 300 odd horses, it's relatively fine margin for each horse. But still, there's still confidence in the market to be able to do that. So it's it was an interesting exercise, Tim, and I think it showed up what just the nature and I guess the fine margin nature of pinhooking.
Big for those that are probably outside the bubble or the sale bloodstock bubble, that hopefully it shows how much it does cost to get a horse to a sale, and you can add on if you've bred the horse with service fees and another production cost. Just how much involved, how much money is involved, and these are the horses that are getting to the sales, let alone the ones that don't make a select sale or for whatever reason have to be kept to race or don't race at all those sort of things. So hopefully it was enlightening for a few people. Thanks for joining us, Rob. I thought, obviously you've got a big weekend coming up with Stradbroke weekend, but I thought in the 2-year-old race, you've got 2 homebreds running, which is quite an achievement for anyone, but to my eye, you've always had a good mare and could always breed a good horse, and particularly from this family with Fabulantes, and obviously a brother to Star Tontes, a Group 1 winner for you. You've just had a lot of success breeding, which is a fair achievement, I would argue.
Yeah, there's a group of us. We started off with Cam Tontes back in the very late 90s, and she proved to be such an amazing because she produced horses like Excellentes and Femme Tontes and King Tontes and Beau Tontes, and there's been a whole heap of them. We've kept the theme of the names going for all those years, and 6 races, 76 wins have come out of the original mare, Ken Tondo. So really quite extraordinary. And fortunate enough, this Fabulantes, he is, as you rightly say, full brother to Star Tontes. We won the Group 1 Tats Tiara, and we sold last year and got 1.1 million for us. So she won $1 million, and we got $1 million when we sold her. So she was a real good money spinner for us. And Fabulantes, he's still an Entain. He won first up, admittedly a lowly race at Ipswich, and then he chased home that amazing Beedman when he won at the Gold Coast that day on that rather unusual track down there. Is the horse good enough to be winning a race like this? I'm not sure, to be honest. He's a good horse. He's shown us he can gallop, but I don't know if he's up to this listed grade. And the other, Carbonara, an interesting name. She's out of a horse that my wife and I bred ourselves called Alivongala. Spaghetti Alivonga is one of my favourite dishes. And along came this one, and we called it Carbonara. So I've got a brother out in the paddock, brother to Carbonara. I think I'll call him Linguini or Tagliatelle or something. I love my Italian food.
But your star turns, but proven to be a good stallion for you. Have you got any breeding philosophies or how those sort of matings come about?
Yeah, I do. A very simple one. His name is Steve Morley from Glenlogan Park. I was smart enough in the early days when I knew nothing about breeding to get in touch with people who do. And Steve's not only a good mate, he's run Glenlogan Park for years. All my mares are there. Steve tells me who we're going to, who we're mating to, and I don't think he's got one wrong yet, all the years I've been with him. So, no, Steve's the reason we've had so much success breeding.
You've always had a good horse or two in the stable, Rob. You always had, but if you look back through your sales history, you never pay much for these horses, the ones that obviously you breed it for yourself, but the ones you actually do get them. And how do you find the value, when you're at the sales, trying to look for these horses when you're competing with, all the big guys, all the big stables, Yeah. How does that work for you? What are you looking for in a horse that you're picking out at the yearling sales?
Again, I've been very lucky. Been early days. I partnered up with a bloodstock agent from New Zealand by the name of Paul Willits. Paul bought our first horse, my brother and I, when I first started training. A horse called Kaminka, who won on Horse Stakes Day, 27 February 1997. Never forget it. My first win at Doom. And Paul and I, we've been mates for years, and he still buys a lot of my horses. And you're right, we never spend too much money on them. And I have been very lucky over the years. I've had horses by buffering that cost 20 Group 1s. Fire Up Fifi, she was only a $5,000 horse. She won the Group 2 Blazer Stakes at Flemington and ran third in the railway. Solzhenitsyn was another horse that Paul got for me. Paul only paid 10 grand for him. He won 2 Touracs at Caulfield. He was pretty good as well. And then, okay, I've had a lot of luck as well. Rothfire was 10 grand a horse. He's won 3.5 million. And he'll run a big race in Australia on Saturday. So we don't spend a lot on them. And to answer your question, philosophy, the pedigree page tends to tell you how much you got to pay for them. I tend to focus more on type, try and buy a nice athletic horse, and if it works. But again, so much of my success has rested on the shoulders of Paul Blitz. Does a great job for me.
And Rothfire, phenomenal horse in a lot of ways. Just, the Golden Rose, he was going to bolt in and beat Ole Kirk, and we all know what he's doing at stud now. That you've nursed him back, and he's had more issues, and even probably not a carnival goes by with that little issue of foot abscess, I believe, but you've nursed him back and ready to go on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Golden Rose, and funny, it's a race I've only ever watched once, and that was live. I didn't want to watch it again because I still had nightmares about that. I said to the rider that day, the only thing will get you beat is if you ride for speed. If you take a trail, let the speed go, you'll win by as far as you can kick a football. And he chose to do the opposite. They ran 10-6, 10-4, 10-3 for the first 3 sections. So no wonder. And then he asked the horse to improve at the 200-metre mark, and that's when he shattered his sesamoids. And I thought we were going to lose the horse, to be honest, that night when the vets called me and said, he's got a shattered sesamoid. And normally that can be terminal for a racehorse, but he's a miracle horse. He's fought back through the adversity of that. It took a year. A lot of people put in a lot of work to get him back to the races, and I call him my miracle horse because not only has he come back racing, well, he's come back and raced at this highest level. And yes, he hasn't won a Group 1 since he came back, but he did run second to Bella Nipontino in a Manicato, and he did beat Giga Kick, that infamous ride of Willows on Giga Kick that day. Who could forget? And, he's won at group level, but he hasn't won at Group 1 level where things haven't gone his way because he's usually faced some form of veterinary, adversity. And lo and behold, that brilliant run in the Doomman 10,000 where, J-Mac lifted Summer in Paris off the canvas. And even James said to me when I saw him the following Saturday, he said, I did not think I was going to get past Rothfire. He kept surging and surging, and it was only probably the weight difference and the fact that Summer in Paris is a genuine Group 1 performer. She got him over the line, and that's why I think James is pretty happy to be on Rothfire on Saturday. But to have come back from so much, and lo and behold, what's he do? Stands on a bloody stone or a pebble or something after his gallop. Come into the stable, we knew pretty much straight away he had an issue. Normally, and if you understand much about horses' feet, they stand on a stone and get a bruise. We call them a stone bruise because it's very simple. But normally it can take 2 or 3 days to resolve. This took 9 days, and it didn't burst out the toe. The infection worked its way up the inside wall of the front of the hoof and burst out the coronet band. So I was a little bit concerned running out of time, how much fitness could he possibly have lost. But in saying that, he did run second in the Group 1 Doomman 10,000, narrowly beaten. He then had a good gallop on the Tuesday morning, a week and a half after that race, leading into the Kingsford Smith. So I wouldn't have done much more with him anyway. And the work he lost through that stone bruise abscess problem, we kept him up to the mark with quite a bit of swimming. Took him to the beach yesterday. He'll go down again today. But you know what? A horse like Rothfire, they tend to fill in the cracks where us trainers get it wrong. If I've got anything wrong with his fitness, won't matter. Horse like him, he's so bloody tough and so strong. And I'm convinced, talking to you guys, that he'll run us a big race on Saturday.
He's been a remarkable horse, Rob.
No, just Rob. The game has changed, I guess, as a trainer. What is the most difficult aspect of being a trainer these days, as opposed to, when you first started out and sort of were, winning premierships and things like that? Has it changed a lot for you?
It has, Tim, and I think the biggest thing that's changed as master is you've got to have a lot of business acumen to make it work nowadays. I mean, costs are out of control. I mean, wages and staff deserve to be paid well, because who wants to get up at 2:00 every bloody day? And, it was 7 degrees this morning. It was cold, and they come in here and they work long hours, and then they go home. They've got to come back in again, and it's a 7 days a week job. And, insurance costs. I mean, work cover. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware of what's happened here in Queensland, but it's been a bone of contention for us for years. My work cover bill $200,000. I mean, it's $4,000 a week insurance fees just for my staff, and I've had to impose a levy on my daily training costs just to cover those costs, and we know it's a nationwide thing. I mean, everyone's home insurance has gone up, contents has gone up, car insurance. Some people in a lot of places nowadays can't even get insurance against floods and fires, depending on where you live. So, just a sign of the times, I guess. But that's probably the biggest thing, Tim. Just business acumen and encouraging new owners to come in, because it's certainly not getting cheap to own a horse. And I'm constantly on the phone and sending emails and begging owners to pay their training fees, because it's not cheap to feed them these days and train them and pay the wages and all the racing costs, incurred. So it's probably the biggest challenge.
Rob, it's been so good to have a chat with us here on Straight Talk. Really appreciate your candor. Best of luck with Rothfire on the weekend. Exciting to see him, get another chance at a Group 1. He's been a remarkable horse for you. And I mean, it's obviously a great feeling to have a good horse. They're the ones that get you out of the bed in the morning, aren't they?
Oh, mate, they're the reason that lets us down.
All the best, Rob, and great to catch up with you.
Yeah, you too, lads. Take care.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. Who's won 3 of Europe's biggest stallion-making races? Native Trail. He mixed in all the right circles. He won the National Stakes, just like Dubawi and Danehill Dancer. He took out the Dewhurst, like Too Darn Hot and Pinatubo, and claimed the Irish 2000 Guineas, like Kingman and Dubawi. An unbeaten champion at 2, a classic winning 3-year-old, and a superb specimen, the same sire line as I'm Invincible. Native Trail returns to Darley, New South Wales this season. Racing class becomes breeding class, and at just $27,500 including GST, here's an opportunity not to be missed. Right, Tim, on to the racing news now, and a big week of racing news again on Wednesday. It's a big day on Wednesday. Long rumoured with James Cummings was going to Hong Kong. Probably drifted a bit in the market in the last few weeks. We probably hadn't heard a bit for a while, but lo and behold, James jumped on a plane this week, ended up in Hong Kong, and was unveiled as Hong Kong Jockey Club's star recruit for the 26-27 season. Not the next season, the season after. So, interesting turn of events there. We can talk about sort of how he got here, but big coup for Hong Kong, and an interesting development for James Cummings' career, coming off, obviously, he's sort of moving away from Godolphin, Tim.
Yeah, as you touched on, there had been speculation, or I think he had a desire for quite some time to perhaps train internationally, and Hong Kong, obvious sort of jurisdiction. But as things have played out, he was looking at establishing himself in Sydney or in Australia as a public trainer once again. And clearly the Jockey Club looks like they've pounced on this and thought, well, we don't want to lose a trainer of James's caliber. We think he'd suit Hong Kong, and they've moved. And if you look at, say, when I think Jamie Richards and certainly when Mark Newnham was announced, even David Eustace, it was sort of maybe 6 months before the season started. He's going to have a long lead time of sort of 12 to 14 months to get himself, get some clients on side. Sourcing horses is going to be interesting. A lot to play out the next 12 months for James, and get himself to hopefully start off with a bang like certainly David Eustace has.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It probably does raise a couple of questions about what's going on back here in Australia. James Cummings was obviously trying to get the stables at Leilani Lodge. It was announced last week he was going to go into Carbine Lodge. Obviously, that's all at the table now. Now, from what we're hearing, the Leilani Lodge thing was going to be not work for him in terms of financially. Well, without putting too fine a point on it, we have an issue here in Australia of retaining talent of these trainers. That James Cummings, who would be set up better than anyone else in history at 37 years of age, of 52 Group 1s behind him, to just jump into an operation himself outside of Godolphin and make it work. Like, he's such a marketable brand. There's arguably no bigger brand in Australian racing than the Cummings brand. It does probably raise a question about why he didn't stay in Australia. And obviously Hong Kong's a great opportunity for anyone to go to, and particularly from a financial point of view. So nothing against James in that regard. He has to pursue his best interests, but Australian racing often talks about its great returns and all this type of stuff. If the best young talent, training talent, is either not going into training ranks or going overseas, I don't know, maybe that says a little bit about where the temperature's at across the board and how people feel about jumping in and a training environment which has become increasingly dominated by a handful of major stables.
Yeah, get in Sydney. Let's if you're a major trainer, if you've seen the number of satellite stables opening up in New South Wales, but if you want to make it, you have to have a presence in Sydney. And clearly, James was favourite to get Leilani Lodge if he wanted it, but it's still, I think it was under 57 boxes. You need scale. Like, that's for those ambitious trainers. Getting boxes is a difficulty, let alone the horses and trying to compete. It's sort of a closed shop at the moment. You need some fresh blood coming through, which I guess possibly comes down to infrastructure investments, doesn't it? And that's, I'm sure the ATC or the proponents of selling Rosehill would argue that. You can see at other sides, Racing New South Wales probably hasn't invested as much in infrastructure as perhaps they arguably could have. There's a lot to play out, and I guess James has thought, while it'd be a massive challenge in Hong Kong, arguably easier. He doesn't have to worry about the administrative side of it. He can just focus on training his horses, and I think from observing his personality, I think it'll suit him, sort of 60 to 70 horses in work and dealing with a few owners rather than syndicates and so forth. Big syndicates and hundreds of owners. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to watch. Obviously, there's plenty of actions at the MRC this week too. The departure of CEO Tom Riley in relatively rapid circumstances, I suppose. John Kanga basically stepping in as executive chairman. Tanya Fulton coming in as chief operating officer to help operate that organisation moving forward. We've had a board member step down. Barb Saunders has stepped down. Looks like it's been triggered by some of the issues around that. I guess without delving into the personalities involved, and obviously there's a bit going on here, and I dare say this will play out a bit more from a, to be perfectly honest, from a legal sense moving forward. But has a little bit of the shine come off the John Kanga show out of all this, do you think, Tim? I mean, I think from my perspective, it's probably a rare negative headline in what has been a sort of a, with the exception of a grandstand fire, which was, which the club couldn't do anything about. It's been a relatively strong run of positive headlines for Kanga since he took over last October.
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely a halo around him and a lot of goodwill garnered by the Save Sandown movement and, cheaper food and initiatives like that. And then, yes, I guess it's, now, run of stories in the mainstream press as well about, they're not going to have a CEO, he's going to be executive chairman. If you're a private business, you can certainly do things like that. It's just, I guess, the given it is a member-based club, sort of acting like that is raised some concerns from Barb Saunders, as you said, who resigned for position on the board. There's a lot it's going to be interesting how it plays out. Those that were anti-John Kanga from the start, or those that sort of resigned or were voted off the board, I'm sure maybe they've got a bit of a smile on their face. We told you so. But it'd be very fascinating again what plays out the next few weeks and months. And there's a lot of work to be done there to get ready for there's the spring carnival, their Group 1s, do they host the Cox Plate, all those sort of things. A lot of things to
They've
work
admitted
out.
they've got track problems. They've admitted they've got
Yep.
track problems. They've brought someone in to help that at quite a significant rate. There's a whole bunch of questions around that. And I think probably, Tim, the other thing is, just from my perspective, is I don't know if this will be contained to the MRC. I think the broader question has been building in the media around about what's going on around about the club mergers. And I think longer term, that's probably something we're probably going to hear a bit more about. So yeah, it is a fascinating sort of situation where we're at the moment, and we'll see how it plays out. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. Don't miss the Great Southern Weanling Sale at Oaklands on Friday, June 13. The 320-strong catalogue includes weanlings by leading stallions Toronado, Too Darn Hot, I'm Invincible, Zoostar, Wooten Bassett, Ole Kirk and Justify, as well as the first crop of 9-time Group 1 winning champion Animo. The Great Southern Weanling Sale has long proven the right option for buyers, whether they be pinhookers or end users. Sale graduates include Group 1 winners Montefilia, Behemoth, Extra Brute and Luna Fox. The sale also continues to be a proven source for pinhookers looking to achieve quality returns. The catalogue is available now at inglis.com.au. Finally, Tim, in wagering, as we often do, finished off on wagering. It is a big part of but we do tend to speak about bloodstock and racing primarily in this podcast, but wagering has been a big week. Probably about 40 minutes after we finished recording last week's broadcast, Dean Shannon left Entain, which was a significant move, obviously been a CEO Entain for a long time, a major figure in the Australian wagering industry. There's obviously a lot going on in Entain at the moment. Without getting too deep into that, they've got this Austrac investigation, which is causing more than a few headaches at the moment. They've had a significant change of management there now. I think Andrew Vuris is the man now in charge, trying to guide them through this next stage. And I think that probably in the next 6 months we'll tell a few stories about where Entain's going forward, because they might do a little bit of a strategic reset depending on what happens. But interesting time for those guys. Entain that obviously operate the Ladbrokes and Neds brands in Australia. The other point I wanted to raise, and this is a significant one, Tim, your article this morning with Australia's biggest fixed odds punter. Now, this punter has asked not to be named, and we've agreed with that because we wanted her to speak freely with us, and they did. He did speak very freely with us. The most significant aspect was he said basically he's starting to look elsewhere, overseas, for other options to expand his operation, because Australian racing is becoming highly taxed and difficult to work with. Now, for me, this is a headline that should resonate with every PRA racing club around Australia, Tim. We've lost big punters in Australia over the last 10, 15 years. We may lose another one in the short to medium term because of the nature of the way that the betting on the racing is structured in Australia.
And the punter makes the point that it doesn't just affect professionals like himself; it affects everyone, from the recreational $5 punter right through to huge syndicates, because they're getting less return for their dollar, whether they know it or not. And this punter in particular bets on all three codes, so significance, not just thoroughbred racing, the greyhound and harness codes, which harness racing in particular battling for turnover. To lose a significant punter like that who's betting every day and could have huge ramifications for their revenue. So the governments as well need to sort of at least take notice and go, okay, why is this happening? Why do they want to look elsewhere? And Hong Kong's an obvious one, but I don't think they're looking just there. There's other jurisdictions. There's Japan with the big tote markets where you can get huge amounts of money on. Anyone of massive scale like this punter will be looking for new outlets to grow their business, but still to possibly scale back or abandon Australia is very concerning.
Yeah, Reno Racing lives in a bubble, but it can't afford to in this regard because the investments are global. The opportunities are global. And I think that, I think part of the challenge in Australia, we have a highly taxed and highly regulated environment, is that there are lower taxed, lower regulated environments overseas, some of which are regulated and some which are not regulated. So there's a whole bunch of options there. It's a fascinating read. Have a read through it about this punter and how they raise their concerns about where Australians wagering industry and punting's heading. It's not all doom and gloom. It's just the nature of people making decisions based upon the fact of where they can, best make money, and that's fair enough. There's a newsletter going out today which is focused straight up about about the mix of recreational and professional punters in Australia and whether that's right at the moment. And people say, oh, professional punters, they just take what they do, but they provide a really important aspect of the industry. Recreational punters are a really key part too. The balance is right, and that's what we're probably looking for. And the question is, at the moment, given the conversations we had on this podcast with John Walter and Nick Heathcote last week, and given the conversation you now have had with this particular punter about where it's heading, Tim, there's a few questions there, isn't there?
It was what I found interesting was about professional punters shaping the market. He argues less volatility is good for all participants, trainers, stewards, because quite often mistakes in the pricing of markets looks like there's integrity concerns. Oh, this, haven't tried, or, who knows why this horse drifted. In fact, it was just a pricing mistake. As we've covered multiple times, there's really only been, Tabcorp and Tab and Bet365 putting up prices and everyone else sort of using that as a basis. So if they make a mistake, which is easy to do, cross betting on every code and meeting across the country, you're going to get those volatile mistakes. So professionals, to knock that into shape nice and early, stewards can be more comfortable of this is the likely chance of this horse or dog winning, and that those big drifts aren't as alarming as they should be, or possibly look to outsiders.
One of the knock-on effects on this, Tim, is probably some consolidation happening broader in the industry. We're talking about the explosion of bookmakers, number of bookmakers in Australia during the post-pandemic period. That's probably coming back a little bit now. We've had one of those this week, VinBet event scooped up by Star Sports. There's a story there on thestraight.com.au. Star Sports are coming to the Australian market and keen to make a bit of a play. It'd be interesting to see where things are up with them. So, interesting little story there as well. So thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen to us on, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and watch us on YouTube. Send us an email, editor@thestraight.com.au. Let us know what you think about what we're doing and any questions or any topics you'd like us to discuss. We'll talk to you again next week.